We'll move ahead with next topic, that is process groups. Okay, so here, in addition to the having a process ID, each process belongs to a process group. Okay, each process belongs to a process group. Okay, a process group is nothing but a collection of one or more processes usually associated with the same job. Okay, what is same job is nothing but the kind of task whatever they are doing it whenever they will come to the system. So one job will come to the system, then for that job will be divided in terms of different processes. Okay, so that can be received signal from the same terminal. Okay, so that's nothing but same job can be received from the same terminal, and each process group has the unique process group id. Okay, each process group id, and they are similar to the process ids. Okay, there is nothing but you can receive it from the, or you can store it on the pid underscore t data type only. Okay, so we'll see how this function get p uh, grp. Okay, this returns the process group id of the caller process. Okay, so there's nothing but whichever process is calling, for that process it will return the process group id of that process only. Okay, so if we saw, it will take always here, always it will take wide data type. Okay, so it's something but you are, it's not receiving anything. Okay, but it will return the return type is always process group id, it will return it. Okay, so and in older version of BSD devices, okay, so instead of this one, same thing was there as a get pgid. Okay, one function was there as a get pgid. Okay, so this process used to take the pid as a input. Okay, so this function used to take the PID as an input for that, and whenever you will give as a PID as a 0, so that time always it will return the whichever process is calling, for that calling process group ID it will return it. Okay, otherwise for that function, if you are passing any PID, if you know any PID of a process, if you are passing that one, so always it will return the that process group ID, it will return it. Okay, and one more thing is you have as a process joins an existing process group. Okay, so a process can join an existing process group or create a new process group by calling a set pgid function. Okay, so set pgid function, whatever is there for that process, we can call you can call this function. Okay, and you can create it or you can join the existing one. Okay, so what all things it will take, it is something but it will take PID, okay, and GID, two things it will take it. And here process group ID, this function always sets a process group ID to PGID. Okay, so whatever PGID you are passing it, so if you sending that one, so always it will set to the PGID group. Okay, in the processor whose process ID is equal to the PID. Okay, so for this one whose process ID is equal to PID, for that it will send it. And so whenever we'll pass it here, PID is 0, so the process ID of the caller is used. Okay, so there is nothing but instead of PID 0, so whoever process is calling, for that process ID will be used. Okay, and if PGID is 0, if you are passing it, so the process ID of the PID is used again. Okay, so as a process group id. Okay, so it will try to set the process group id as a pgid, so which are process is calling, for that it will use it for the uh, pgid. Okay, so this in the most job control cells. Okay, so what will happen is uh, in most job control cells, this function is called after the fork only. Okay, so immediately it will be called after the fork, so that to have a parent set the process group id of the child. Okay, so it's nothing but child whatever is there. Normally what intention is there is, so PGID and process ID should we will try to make a different one. Okay, so whenever parent will call the fork, so immediately child will inherit the process group ID. Okay, so and whoever will do this task, that is nothing but they will try to create a group. Okay, so process ID of that group ID of that entire group, and whichever process is calling that process. Okay, so both will be the same. Okay, so to avoid that one, what we will do is normally we will call the fork and immediately exec will be called. So that time child inherits the parents group ID. Okay, and parent will ask parent to terminate it, and since we are executing the exec, so again same thing, maybe you can call the same object code. Okay, so that time what will happen, same program you are running it, but PID of the child will be different. So since PID of the child is different, and this group ID is inherited from the parent, so that is also will be different. So by default, you never will child process ID and group ID of that will never be the same. Okay, so always it will be different only. So to do that one, normally we will do the fork, then the set pgid functions will be called in general. Okay, this will be called. Okay, so like this we can create the process groups. Okay, so now we'll see here. Okay, this is what we discussed. Okay, so here now we'll see the session. Okay, so session is nothing but here again collection of one or more process groups. Okay, so process group is nothing but collection of one or more processes. Okay, now session is nothing but collection of one or more process groups. Together we can form a process session. Okay, so for example we could have the assignment, there is arrangement whatever we shown in the here this figure. Okay, so this is the figure, so like this you can have it. So here this is the first process group, second process group, third process group. So like this three process groups are there, this entire thing together is my session. Okay, so here this in process in the groups are usually placed there by the shell pipeline. Okay, so like process 1, okay, slash process 2 ampersand normally will give it. So you are not one. Okay, so what we can do is, so how we can form this nothing but, so we had to say actually process 1. Okay, this is pipeline. Process 1 pipeline with process 2, then ampersand. Okay, if you are giving this one in a terminal, what will happen is nothing but it will create a one group. Okay, there's nothing but here process 1 and process 2 group, whatever we had in that figure, same thing. Okay, so like that we have the process 3, 4 and 5. Okay, so here also again here process 3, then process 4. Okay, plan with process 5. So these are grouped again. Okay, and then if you given terminal enter is nothing but this is again one group. So these things together is nothing but session. So here we are merging it. This is one group, this is second group, and before this we have one more group. Okay, there is nothing but login shell. That is nothing but which are terminal you are running it. This is by default in the terminal you are there. So that's process is executing. So the terminal also has the one processor. Okay, so these things together is a one session. Okay, like this we can create it. So here one, these two we added, then this third one is added. So like this we can have the one session. So So like this we can have it. And to create a session also we have as a set sid. Okay, so set sid is nothing but it will create the session. Okay, so here it will not take any parameter. Okay, so it's always takes as a wide. Okay, and return type is a PID. It's nothing but is a group leader. Okay, so we process group leader who will be returned. So there's nothing but whoever is creating the session for that group leader will be returned. Okay, so here is a group ID of so process group ID is returned actually. Okay, so process group ID is written. So here while creating the session there are some conditions are there. Okay, so how we can create that session and who can create the session. Okay, for example, if the calling process is not a process group leader. Okay, so whichever process is calling that this process is not a group leader, then it can create a new session. Okay, so that time three things will happen. So first thing is it become the session leader. So whichever session is created, so in a process you will be having the process leader. That's nothing but whoever created the group of the process is nothing but process group leader. Okay, so now like that here suppose consider as a in this only one process is there, so he is the leader. So here two processes are there, suppose process one is the leader here. Okay, so here three processes are there, consider as a five is the process group leader. So in this, so he is the leader. So in this the process one is leader, here only one is there, so he is the leader. So now we want to create a session. Okay, so now what we are saying is here what we are doing is so whoever process is calling set sid. Okay, so that process if it is a not a leader, consider the process 2 who is a not a process group leader, process 2. So he is calling the this function set sid. Okay, so that time what will happen? So set sid. Okay, set aside. Okay, so that time he is calling a process means here what will happen? So three things will be happened. Okay, so it will create a new session and it will happen three things. So the process becomes the session leader. Whichever is calling that process becomes the process, session leader for a new session. So new session will be created and it will become the session leader. Okay, and the process is the only process in this new session. So in the beginning what will happen? So whichever process is called, that process will be the only the process in this new session. Okay, the process becomes second thing is the process becomes the process group leader of a new process group. And the process group id is the process id of the calling process. Okay, it's nothing but whichever process we called for that process, whichever id will be there, so that id itself will become the session id. Okay, so for this one, sorry, not session id, will never will be having the session id. We will, for that one group will be created. That group is nothing but it will, that group id is nothing but whichever process is called this set sid. For that first group is created, that's using whichever process is calling. So that group itself id is nothing but whichever process is calling that pid. Okay, then third thing is the process has no controlling terminal. Okay, so this don't have any controlling terminal. So whichever controlling terminals we discussed. Okay, so next we'll discuss those things. And so it will never be having the controlling terminal. So before calling the ss uh, okay, so okay, this process will not have the any controlling terminal. So three things I will repeat it once again. Okay, so whenever your process is calling set sid, so if that process is not a group id process group leader of any of the group. Okay, so that time what will happen? It will create a new session, and first thing is it will become the session leader. Okay, and second one, so immediately whenever it will create a session, so that time it will become session leader. Along with that, it will become a, that process itself will become as a one, it will form one group. Okay, so that group id is equal to whatever process id is there. Okay, so whichever process is calling, for that process id itself will become the group id of the processes. Okay, and this process has no controlling terminals. Okay, so this will be there. Okay, so then one more thing is one more is we have next as a get SID. Okay, so it's nothing but one more thing we have, that is get SID. So here get SID, what it will do is normally whatever session leaders, it will give the session leaders process group id. Okay, so session leaders, so whoever is the session leader for that group id, so that it will give it. So you have to pass the pid, so that it will returns the process group ids of the calling process session leader. So whichever calling process session leader is there for that process group id, it will return it. Okay, so get SID, so it will return it. Okay, if PID whatever is there, that if you are passing as a zero, so it will return the calling process only. Otherwise, if you want to know it for the other different process, you can pass the PID, particular PID, it will return the group ID of that session leaders. Okay, it will return.